Well, let's see how the quest for the Grail is going today. It would never have done for Red to bring Blackie to this inn, because they knew his mother. Crummy, of course, too, could never have come. But he now began to enjoy the full benefit of having found a girl at once so respectable and so simple-minded as Sally Jones. When Sally was going, and they stood talking in the hallway, the landlady pointed upstairs and spoke in a whispered voice. "You've been a sore trial today, you've been. John had to lock she up in the back room. It was so noisy, you understand, in front. He'll be asleep now, John thinks, and a holds 'tis best to let she bide where he be. She don't, as general rule, settle down to sleep in back room. Back room ain't what you might call the room anyone would choose to sleep in, but Bet ain't as particular as some folks be, owing to her being as she is." They're talking about Bet, the crazy lady, I think, Mad Bet. Destiny, or chance, whichever it was, now decreed that Red Robinson, having supped full of the sweets of love, was to be deprived of the pleasant half-hour of luxurious rumination which he had planned for himself. The old landlord went himself a step of the way down Checkwell Street with Sally. "The wind can't hurt a pretty girl," he said, "but it can ruffle and rumple her worse nor we would ever be allowed for her to do." There was a stir and a confusion now in the little passage that led from the back of the bar-room to the old cobbled yard. Solly Lou suddenly appeared in sight from these back premises, dragging after him into the lamplight an extraordinary figure. Mrs. The stableman was crying. "You must pardon me if—" Mr. Lou was quite out of breath. He was panting like a hound in summer as he struggled to hold back the person who emerged with him now. "I have told Finn Toller that he be too booze to speak to any Christian man, least of all any friend of the family, but I says I must speak in private to Mr. Robinson." "In private, I said," repeated the drunken derelict, staggering to an erect position, but keeping his hand to Solly Lou's shoulder. "In private it must be, look'ee, and old Finn do know what in's mind to say done, though I have had a tidy drop in the house. But old Finn do know. I'm sorry about the accents. The lamplight, by which the landlady of St. Michael's now watched with an indignant eye this invasion of her premises, hung over the back door of the inn. It swayed to and fro in the wind, and through the open door, behind the two lurching men, Red Robinson could catch a glimpse of faintly gleaming cobblestones and dimly illuminated wood piles and empty beer bottles. A large rain-filled water butt showed too in the gusty wind door frame, while along with the howling wind there came a strong odor of rank straw and sour human urine. Yummy. "You ain't fit to talk to the missus, nor to her friends," reiterated Sally. "You ain't fit for naught but workus, and to workus you come, your old rum drinker, your old deck swabbler." I think I did a good pronunciation of workus there, so I'm giving myself credit for that. "Stand straight and answer me at once, Finn Toller," exclaimed the angry landlady. "What were you doing in our yard? Come now, no nonsense. I say, what were you doing there, Finn Toller? Speak up, can't ye understand plain English?" "I don't know what to say to ye, missus," muttered the helpless ruffian. "But I do know weel in me mind that 'tis Mr. Robinson here, what I've come to see. At this point, so potent was the Bristol rum to which Solly Lou had been rashly treating this fish from the bottom of the Glastonbury pond, that, disregarding the landlady's indignation, the wretch actually began murmuring a lewd catch that had been formerly popular in Bove Tavern and Beckery. Oh, I gotta sing again. "I've a whisper for you in your mare's taller. Billcock crow to Kate. I've a whisper for you, me Connie dear. You may be away over Homeland and Mere, and I be at your gate. Again, no idea how that song goes, but that's what we got. Mr. Fintaler in his natural condition was no engaging sight. Neither am I. In this present state, he was a revolting object. He was a sand-haired individual with a loose, straggly, pale-colored beard. He gave the impression of being completely devoid of both eyebrows and eyelashes. Is this me? Yeah. So bleached and whitish in his case were the normal appendages to the human countenance. His mouth was always open and always slobbering, but although his whole expression was furtive and dodging, his teeth were large and strong and wolfish. Mr. Toller looked, in fact, like a man weak to the verge of imbecility who had been ironically endowed with the teeth of a strong beast of prey. Red Robinson did not at all relish the look of things that this repulsive hangdog creature shuffled now towards him and fixed him upon him a look of revolting confederacy, a look that seemed to say, "Here I am, Mr. Robinson. You've called me up, and here I am." The truth was that at the end of one of his most eloquent revolutionary speeches to the Glastonbury comrades, Mr. Toller had sneaked up to Red and compelled him to write his name down in the book they kept, as available for any activities required. "And the dirtier the better," Mr. Toller had added, as he slobbered over the table. Red had got into trouble with the other comrades for allowing the man to write his name down in the book. They told him that it was enough for him if the filthiest beggar swore he would spit in the road when Mr. Crow passed by. "That's enough to haul him into the party, eh?" they said. Nor was their sarcasm unjustified. Red took no interest at all in keeping up the quality or integrity of the comrades. What he was after, as Fintaler, with his wolfish instinct, had very quickly detected, were recruits, not to Marxism. Yeah, it says Marxianism, not Marxism. Marxianism. But to hate. "My husband will be back in a minute," said the landlady sternly. "And you remember how we got rid of you the other night when you were hanging round so late." "What I've got to say, missus, be for Mr. Robinson's ear alone. Please allow me, missus, for all that us poor folks have got left." He stopped and threw a very sinister leer at Red. "Be what he put in our minds be that by they as be book-learned and glib of tongue, like this clever mister here, who is foreman of his worships. Us poor dogs hasn't got anything left in the world, us hasn't, except they nice little thoughties, they pretty thoughties, what clever ones like mister here do put into we." It was clear that the threat of the landlord's return had sobered Confin, as his neighbors called him, quite a good deal. He seemed able to walk by himself now, for he shook away Sally Lou's supporting arm. His pale, lidless blue eyes began peering about like the eyes of a maggot dislodged from its native habitation and seeking a refuge. "If Mr. Robinson will come in here with me," he said now, moving towards the pleasant parlor where Red and Sally had been enjoying themselves, "I won't make no trouble for no one. But if Mister here, what he be so clever and so book-learned, won't let I speak to he, I'll raise such a trouble that you'll have to call for the police." "Well, what impudence is this?" cried the landlady. "You wait till my husband comes back. He'll show you whether he has to call for the police to give you the—" But to the good woman's complete amazement, Red himself intervened at this point. "I'd better hear what he's got to say," he said. "'Tis no good disturbing the place when he says he's got quite as a limb of its own self, if I take him in them for a jiffy. That's so, ain't it, Coffin?" Mr. Toller, apparently completely sobered now, bowed to the landlady, made a grimace at Sally Lou, and followed his clever one into the parlor where Red shut the door. It would be difficult to explain the subtle cause of Mr. Robinson's submission to this demand of Mr. Toller to speak with him, but undoubtedly, mingled with other things, there had sprung up, the very second these two men met, that curious psychic fear, of which mention has already been made in regard to Lord P.'s attitude to his bastard. Glastonbury was, if the real truth were revealed, just as every small town is, crowded with queer, morbid, and even humorous instances of this irrational terror of one personality for another. These fear links can be grotesquely joined up in a spiritual, mathematical, and nervous pattern of psychic subordination. And I offer the listeners there to draw up your own fear maps, if you get the time, and submit them to me, and maybe I'll share them on the next podcast, or whatever they call these things. Philip Crowe himself had been afraid, in this particular way, of Tom Barter. Indeed, these mysterious fear links brought together, in an ascending and descending scale of fear, the great Lord P and the gentleman called Codfin. For Lord P was afraid of Zoyland. Zoyland was afraid of Philip. Philip, though this latter did not know it, was afraid of Barter. Barter was afraid of Red, while Red, and here we reached the convoluted secret as to why he was at this very moment so carefully closing the parlor door, was afraid of Mr. Toller. There was an interesting and curious pair as they stood facing each other now by the parlor fireplace. Red was determined not to offer Codfin a drink or to ask him to sit down. Mr. Toller's watery blue eyes, blotched, freckly face, and tow-colored beard kept turning. Mine's really more red than tow-colored. Kept turning with a sort of feeble insistence, like that of a great dazed, malignant cockchafer, towards the half-empty bottle. "What is it?" said Red. "What do you want? Tell me quickly, for he'll be back in a minute. He's only taking Miss Jones a bit on the way home." There's no earthly reason why Red should have informed Codfin that the landlord of St. Michael's was taking Miss Jones anywhere. This excessive, hurried, eager confidence, expressed in a cross and peevish tone, was a beautiful example of psychic link fear. What a beautiful example of psychic link fear, working in accordance with its nature. After shutting the door, Red walked to the fireplace, leaving Finn Toller standing in the middle of the room. Red glanced at the man hurriedly, and then, quite as hurriedly, turned his face away. From the straggly beard, the watery eyes, the ragged clothes, there emanated something that Red found extremely perturbing. It was one of those moments where the pre-birth stirrings of a ghastly idea are huddled and swaddled in an ominous silence. Certain thoughts that have been long nurtured in deep half-conscious brooding manifest themselves when they finally emerge into the light with a horrid tangibility that is like the impact of something physically shocking. And into this warm, firelit room, full of the aura of a young feminine body that has been so assiduously courted and caressed that its sweet essence pervades the air, there now projected itself a presence that was monstrous, revolting, intolerable. From each particular hair of Mr. Toller's beard this presence emanated. From the Adam's apple on his bare, dirty neck, from the blood-stained rims of his watery eyes, from the yellowish fluff growing like fungus of cheese from the back of his hands, from a curtain beyond the pale look of his naked, a certain look, beyond the pale look of his naked, shirtless wrist bones, this presence grew and grew and grew in that closed room. It sprang from Toller, but it was distant from Toller. It seemed to find in the fragrance of the corded body of Sally Jones an air favorable to its monstrous expansion. I'll have to see what Codfin says on the next Glastonbury. So until next time, hopefully this will save properly, and I'll see you again.